Good evening and welcome to another edition of Life is People. I'm very honoured tonight to be tonight, Tim.
Yeah, brilliant. Very, very hungover. We played our first show in a while with my band. I've been doing lots of kind of solo shows, but with like sort of a backing band. But last night we did our first proper show with my proper band since our tour. We did a UK tour, so all the band are Brazilian, and in July we did a UK tour. And yeah, last night was our first proper show in a while. So yeah, it was really good. A few people came down, and yeah, it was it was a nice night. And yeah, it got a little bit out of hand after. And yeah, I'm feeling the effects today.
So let's linger on that then, because so what you take it? The show was in Rio, yeah?
Yeah, the show's in Rio. Yeah, a little sort of art gallery place called Blade Galleria. So I kind of, as well as playing the shows, I think how I met Ceiling Demons is I like organize events and stuff, and I try and get all different genres, different styles, different kinds of artists, bands, projects to perform. And yeah, and last night was kind of one of those nights. There was us and another band from Rio playing who were on the same record label called Barbara Weaver, which is red beard in Portuguese. And yeah, and us. So yeah, it was a good night.
And this is the other thing, sort of like, taking on from that step now, from someone who lived down, your part of the world for many years. And it's always kind of shocks people when I speak to people here about gigs here, and often I'm like, say when we do the Ceiling Demons, it's kind of like, you finish at 11 on the dot. And I always say to people, well, down in South America, that's like roughly when the first band are coming on, because you'll be playing at like 3 in the morning. It's a real difference between the UK
it's really, it's like, I went to a show on Friday night, it was like that. The bands they were sound checking at midnight, and the show didn't start until 1:30, I think. And it's really weird. Part of my solo show, I have like a PowerPoint presentation, and like I get into character and do this PowerPoint presentation. And we did one show in the red light district here. So the red light district is called Vila Mimosa, in red light district in Rio de Janeiro. And we were playing at a bar there called O Pecado, which means the sin. And I think I was giving a PowerPoint presentation at 4 a.m. in the morning. It was just like the oddest feeling. Like performing at 4 a.m. is one thing, but performing a show that involves a PowerPoint presentation at 4 a.m. in a red light district in Rio de Janeiro was, it's kind of interesting. But yeah, that's what it's like here, right? Everything starts later, and if the start time of the show says 8 p.m., it's not starting before 10.
No, one of the things I'm fascinated, it's been like 13, 14 years since I lived down in South America, and obviously that was before smartphones were in everybody's hands. So I've often wondered, because I went to so many shows and I know exactly the kind of feel you're talking about, and it's hard to describe to someone on this part of the world how much the difference is, because it's just a different vibe, which is something else to discuss. But on the general one, do the audiences, when you're going to do shows, are they getting, like the English people, they're all getting their phones out and doing the standard standing there recording you, or is that not a cultural thing in Brazil?
Yeah, I think no, it is very much. I mean, like in Rio, like it's I mean, Instagram's everything right here. It's all about Instagram non-stop. I don't know. I'm so used to seeing phones now at shows that I've kind of just like, I don't even notice it, because it's just such. I mean, it's not something that like I'm bothered about myself. Like I'm not like to record stuff at a show, but like I'm just so used to seeing it everywhere now that it's just like I don't even notice it that much anymore. Not the thing.
Yeah.
So it's that famous thing here.
The other sort of, well, it's obviously sort of a question that springs from all of this, with you being obviously an Englishman living down in Brazil. When you're, like you said last night, will you deliberately try to speak in Portuguese, or do you mix it up? And do people speak? Do they understand? Because in Argentina, it took me a while to actually learn how to speak Spanish, because everyone I met wanted to speak English to me. It's kind of like second language, and they want to practice it. Is that something you find, or when you're at shows, that you have to overly pronounce, overly really jump into speaking Portuguese, or people? Is there a mixture? Of how does it work for you?
Yeah, it's very interesting you should say that, because my shows involve, like, you know, I'm sure like the singing demons will attest to this. My shows involve a lot of talking. Often there's more talking between the songs than actual songs. So, and a lot, you know, so we do it a few different ways, because the concept of the band is that the band that I played in last night, that we're like a fake cover band, right? So we tell the audience that we're playing covers, and we're not. We're actually playing original songs. And we've got like a kind of history of the band, right? This fake band from the 1970s that never existed. So I spent a lot of time telling stories about this fake band that never existed. So we get around that in a few ways. Like sometimes the drummer translates stuff. He has some like recorded clips in Portuguese that he plays. But I think in terms of the language barrier, yeah, even though I speak a little bit of Portuguese, I still mainly speak in English. It shows, because I find it, like, I can order stuff in a restaurant or whatever, or, you know, get by day to day in Portuguese, but I can't really express myself so in Portuguese. So I tend to speak a lot of English at my shows. And what you'll find is as well is that, like, for example, if you want to go to university here, you know, go to a public university, you've got to pass exams in English, right? If you're doing a PhD here, and you know how qualified, like, this is what amazes me here, like how qualified everyone is in Brazil, and how educated everyone is in Brazil. Like the people I meet, like if you want to do a PhD in Brazil, you have to speak 3 languages. You have to know 3 languages before you, and that's for any PhD in any subject, right? So yeah, people tend to be like, you know, very well educated, and especially, you know, kind of going to like arty shows as well, right? So yeah, it's not normally a problem, me speaking English, I don't think.
Yeah. One of the other sort of shocks, and this is something particularly from a creative point of view, and I'll tell you your thought, you know, your thoughts and experience on this. I've only been to Rio once or twice, and mainly just either landing it or flying over it. But one of the things that always sticks in my mind about flying over Rio was like, you saw the enormity of the city. So someone comes through from England, and it's one of those conversations you have. They're like, yeah, but they live in cities where there's 25 million plus, and that's seen as a kind of average city down in
Yeah.
So how have you found that? You know, diving into that many people in that, you know, in a culture that's completely different from, you know, England. How have you actually found that experience?
Yeah, I think, well, the first time, like, when I was growing up, so I grew up in Stoke-on-Trent, and I never, like, with my parents, I never went abroad on holidays, so I had like no overseas holidays. If we went on holiday, it was like to Wales or to, you know, to Devon or something. So as soon as like I could get a job, and I was working in petrol stations and stuff like this, all I wanted to spend my money on was going to see places, because I'd never had that opportunity. And so the first time I went to Rio, I think I was like 19, and Rio was big, but then we flew into Sao Paulo, and that just blew me away, because Sao Paulo, it's just, you know, it's skyscrapers to the horizon, and then you keep flying, and it's skyscrapers, skyscrapers, skyscrapers for forever. And you arrive back in London, and London just looks like lots of little villages. You know, you fly, you know, obviously you've got like the you know, the Shard and like that kind of stuff, and a few, but in comparison, like even London just looks like a pretty little village from above compared to flying into Sao Paulo. The flip side of it is living in, so I live in Botafogo. So Botafogo, I don't know if you remember from when you were there. It's kind of it's in Zona Sul, so it's near, near the beaches, near to Copacabana, but it's more of a like sort of bohemian sort of feel. But yeah, it's most of the like the thing with Rio, and you'll probably remember this, is that basically like anyone who's like middle class or got a job, like a high paying job, lives in a very small part of Rio, the Zona Sul area. So that's like Ipanema, Copacabana, Botafogo, Leblon, Lagoa. So this very small area. And then you've got just suburbs that just go on forever and ever and ever. And usually is like when you're living this kind of like my kind of sort of bourgeois middle class life that I live out here, you don't really see that a lot, right? You don't really see the 20 miles worth of suburbs as you're driving out the city, because that often really.
Yeah, I can completely concur about Sao Paulo. I remember the first time I flew over Sao Paulo, looking down, it just looked like a graveyard. Like you say, there was just skyscrapers as far as you could see, and it was like, I don't know, it's kind of like one of my first experiences flying, over Sao Paulo, thinking, oh wow, I'm in a different continent completely now.
Yeah.
That's it's one of the beautiful things that we've still got on this planet. That we can go to other parts of the world, and there are actual cultural differences without it all being Starbucks and Mackie D's everywhere. Although they do exist everywhere, trust me.
Yeah. No, definitely. Like this, I still have to. What I try and do each day is when I'm walking, because it's very easy. When you live somewhere, you kind of forget how lucky you are, right? And you can take things for granted a lot. And I always try and get out at lunchtime, and have a little walk about, and sort of try and just think, yeah, I am, really, really lucky to be where I am. And it is nice to be able to go and like, buy a coconut on the beach and things like that. Things that you do take for granted. I mean, I lived up until 2014, I lived like, I spent 10 years working at a state school, just in Hemel Hempstead, so just in the suburbs outside of Watford, So I spent 10 years in the suburbs there, and there's lots of great things about it, and there's lots of things that I enjoyed about it. But I've got a nice thing that I enjoy being here as well.
Is there anything? I mean, you just sort of hinted upon that, and I mean, fair play to you for trying to big up Hemel Hempstead. But generally, I mean, one of the things I missed, particularly, it's just me again, but I missed having seasons. I mean, don't get me wrong, everyone's like, oh, it must be great living in the sunshine every day, but you're like every day, it's kind of like you want that winter, and is that something that overlaps about you?
Yeah, very much. I spent 2 years in Japan, so I lived in Japan for 2 years, and that was like 20 years ago when I lived in Japan, and that was the thing I loved most about Japan, is the appreciation for the seasons. And like obviously, like now you go to the supermarket and you can get anything all year round, but in Japan they would, like, I don't know if it's changed now because it's 20 years since I was there, but in Japan, there was, what was in the supermarket changed based on the season, right? And like I remember, like I used to, at the time I used to get like a little bit pissed off because like there's an outdoor swimming pool, right? And the outdoor swimming pool was only open in July and August. And it opened on the 1st of July and it closed on 31st of August. Now, it didn't matter if it was super hot on the 30th of August or the 1st of September. That swimming pool's closed, right? And it makes you appreciate it. Like looking back, knowing that you can only go in those 2 months makes you appreciate it a lot more, I think.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's one of the things that I try to tell. I think particularly creative people who, times, as you know, you go through moments when you have blanks in what you can create, and a lot of people, to sort of touch upon it, a lot of creative people particularly find depression quite hard to deal with. And I always say to them, like you just alluded on, go outside and appreciate the small things, because I think sometimes you can live in this world where everything's so quick and everything's coming at you a million miles an hour. Just to stop and appreciate the fact that we've got life, which is a beautiful thing. It really highlights, again, it's one of the things that you sort of tapped upon when you were sort of speaking. And it's one of the big differences I find between this part of the world, and it's really, really, and I think you kind of gently sort of, white COVID, but it was the glaring differences between the super rich and the super poor. And you realise that, man, there's people on this planet right now, and I always say to people over here, like, well, you've got running water, you've got electricity. I mean, I'm sure where you are now, you get on a bus within 45 minutes, people haven't got any running water, they haven't got any, these are things, like I say, the small things to appreciate.
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, like, I know in Brazil, like, sometimes I feel bad sometimes because, like, I see, like, I've got quite a nice job here, right? I'm head of computer science at school here, and I'm in charge of the D&V program, so I do all the outdoor stuff. And I look at my qualifications, and I've been able to get that job with, moderate like qualifications, moderate level experience, because I'm British, right? And I've come, I haven't even a very normal average upbringing, but that's given me the opportunity to go and do stuff like this. And then every day I come across people who are like Brazilians who are way more qualified than me, way more well educated than me, struggling just to get by. So yeah, you have to really appreciate what you have sometimes.
Yeah. So sort of like take this back a few steps. I mean, where did your journey with music and creativity begin? Was that as a child, or was it something you got into when you were teenagers? Where did it all begin?
It's really weird. Like, I would say my proper what made me become, like, I wouldn't say proper, but like taking it seriously was actually I met Peter Crouch. You know, the tall footballer.
Yeah.
Peter Crouch. So I was going for my job interview for the job I have now in Rio. This was 2014, and one of the reasons I got the job is I bumped into Peter Crouch at the train station, right? And he was playing for Stoke City at the time, and I'm a Stoke City fan. And he'd scored the night before against Newcastle. I went up to him and I was like, "Oh, great goal last night, Peter." And he said, "Oh, cheers, mate, cheers." And he asked me what I was doing, and I said, "Oh, I'm just here for a job interview." And he was like, "Oh, mate, you'll get it." So I walked into this job interview like super confident, and I got the job in Brazil. And then when I got the job in Brazil, I was like, "Oh, that's a really good thing." And that gave me the confidence to then start doing the music seriously. So getting the job in Brazil and doing the music in the UK started around the same time, because I'd been doing it for, like, no one in my family does music. So all my like very sporty sort of background. So all my family are into sport, very sort of sporty. There's no sort of artistic people in my family. So I never thought as a kid that I could do music. I never thought that it was an option. And I remember like being on a bus to a rugby match when I was playing rugby. I was 16, 17, and there was some lads on the bus and they were talking about playing a gig, and they were talking about this gig they played, and I was thinking, wow, that sounds like the best thing ever. I can't ever imagine playing a gig. Like, it's just, I thought, I play a gig, wow. And that was like 16, 17 at the time. And yeah, so I didn't play I played a couple of shows in Japan, like little things, like little open mics, and I kind of did a few open mics, and inevitably, like, going to open mics, it just left me with this really left me feeling really unconfident, and it did me more harm than good, I think, because I'd always get a pretty negative reaction. And then yeah, so I only started doing, I was always like writing songs since the age of like 16, but it took me about 5-6 years to learn a few chords on guitar. I forced this famous music professor at Liverpool University to teach me guitar. I kind of burst into his office one afternoon and said, "Will you teach me guitar?" And I didn't know that he was super famous and he had a radio show, and he was like, I think he was a bit shocked that I just sort of burst into his office, and I got talking to him, and he actually knew people in Stoke, and he knew some people in my family, which was really weird. It was a crazy coincidence. And that he used to be a van driver. My dad drives a van around Stoke, and he drove a van around Stoke, and so he'd give me these guitar lessons. And then like I didn't play a show until I was like 35, and I'm like 43 now. So yeah, it's a weird route. So it didn't really start. I'm very late into it.
So how did you get to meet? Was that coincidental? I mean, this is one of the things that we find once we go down like this path of life, that these coincidences happen. I mean, how did you meet the fellow band members in, Sale and stuff? And how did that happen?
Okay, yeah. So basically, I mean, yeah. Let's have a think. So this band now, we started chatting online during the pandemic. So I was in another band in Rio before that, and the drummer used to come to my shows, my old band. So I was in another band, and he used to come and watch the shows, and he joined like that. I think the guitarist was a friend of his. And I think I put an advert on a Facebook group, like for musicians in Brazil. Like there's like a musicians in Brazil Facebook group, and then the bassist Louisa, she joined because of that. We've been doing it for like 2 years. It's going well. Like we all get on really well. So yeah.
So how does that work? Do they all speak English, or is it sort of like
they all speak English. Louisa, the bass player, her father lives in New York, and she's got family in Denmark. And Oscar and Yuri, the guitarist drummer, they speak English as well. So yeah, they all. It makes me lazy because obviously I should really be speaking more Portuguese and getting better at Portuguese, but yeah.
So again, are they coming from? One of my majors kind of. I find it's an educated part of my life is going down to South America, and it's like this whole complete set of genre of music I'd heard of certain things. You've heard a bit of tango, you've heard of certain things, but when you realise that I don't know, maybe it's changed since I've been there, but it's almost like, it's such a lively experience and fusion that's never ending. It doesn't become stale. I mean, it's one of the things about music over here, it becomes very stale because everyone's trying to follow the same, and we're in a small sort of market in the country. But over there's so many, you'll get someone who could be completely in a rock band, and you find out he's in a side project, he's a jazz pianist or something. That's very tough.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, like, you look at bands now, because I put on one of the venues I put shows on at is the Brixton Windmill, right? It's a very famous venue, and you got these bands like Black Midi, Black Country New Road, all these bands that take in these different influences. And you come to Rio, and there's 20 bands like that no one's heard of, and like Black Midi and stuff, they're like having this massive impact and having massive success. And in Rio, playing in little venues to 10 people, you've got bands that are just as talented, just as exciting, and there's lots of them, right? They're all taking, like you say, taking all these different elements and mixing. Like one of my friends, Eduardo, he's going to be playing at a festival in Petropolis, which is like in the mountains outside Rio. We're playing a festival in 2 weeks. Now a bass player can't come, so he's going to step in and play bass for this show. And he's like in this band called Amina Banda Secreta, which means like my secret band, right? And they take samba, but then they combine it with all it's like samba and tom waits and all this kind of like Black Midi mixed together, and they're really, really awesome. And there's loads of bands like that.
Yeah, it's one of the things that it's wonderful we live in a world where we've got the internet and these things can be more widely shared than just sets hanging around people. But I don't know. My future, my hope is, and that's why I say the year of the creative is rising. My hope is there becomes a point where people, it's almost like you've got so much choice but people, I don't know, I equate it to like a supermarket. You can go to a supermarket, you know, and people can walk past all the foods, you know, from different cultures and different, but they still go to the bangers and mash because that's what they're used to. So it's that kind of trying to open people up, and it's a difficult thing. I mean, I speak with museums a lot, and they say it's a very difficult thing. It's just trying to. Well, it's almost the other way around. There's so much choice, so much music being put out on a daily basis. Actually, trying to find and experiment in new fields. It's almost more difficult now than it ever was maybe 20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a massive struggle, right? I think it's great that music's a lot more democratic now, in the sense that anyone can put out music, right? And anyone can, you know, put stuff on Spotify and stuff. But that obviously means that there's a lot of crap in there as well. And then, so yeah, it's hard, right? Especially when people's attention spans are kind of small, you know, or less because of the world in which we live. To try and, I mean, with my shows, what I try and do is so basically how I met Sea and Demons is under Jack of the Arts. I organise shows all over the UK, and the reason why I started doing that is I felt like, one, I didn't get the idea of having like fixed genres of a night, like, oh, this is, you know, post-rock night, this is, you know, metal night. And the other thing is that it was like you had these promoters who were saying you could only perform if you could get this many people to come to the show, and you sold so many tickets, and you have so many followers. And I just thought, I just couldn't be bothered with that. So I started organising my own events, and I try and give bands an opportunity to play shows in different parts of the country, and even in Europe. I put on quite a few shows in Europe, give people the opportunity to play shows in venues they wouldn't normally play shows at, alongside artists they wouldn't normally play with. So yeah, that's what I kind of try and do. It doesn't always go to plan. Like, I'll put on events, there'll be no one there, and that happens all the time. But then I'll have other events where, you know, it does work, right? We played somewhere, and I always try and play at unconventional places. Like, we did a show in Glasgow in July, right? And it turned out we were playing in a swingers club. We didn't know it was a swingers club. So we booked this venue, and we went upstairs, and there was like sex chairs and things like that. And we're like, this is a bit odd. And then they locked the doors, right, on us, and we're like, are we allowed to leave? And then no one came to the show, right? So it's just us playing, and like the owners. And then they were trying to make us stay for longer, and we were thinking, it's a bit weird. Like, we just want to go now. And they were like, no, stay. So yeah, you know, it does lead to lots of interesting sort of outcomes. But yeah, just try and do things on your own terms, rather than, you know, going along with having to have so many likes or followers, have so many fans and stuff.
So yeah, that's the thing about being in a band. You can come up with that story that some people would never even think about even in their own heads. Again, on the appreciation one, again, I think it's one of the things that's again, learning to appreciate the small things. It's like, I mean, when the lockdown hit over here, the scene did gigs, and there was no audience, and you know, you're going to events you've been at before, and it's been quite full, you know, and then you stood there with just yourself, and you know, it's kind of appreciate that. Even just one person turns up, it's to appreciate it, rather than sort of thinking, why haven't I sold that? Why haven't I got 1,000 clicks? Why haven't, you know, again, just sort of down constantly. So now you kind of alluded on this, and I don't know how much you want to speak upon it, but you're planning to come over, what is it, whole of January, and what have you got?
UK the whole of January. So this, I've not done many European shows since the pandemic. So what I'm going to do on this tour is more shows in Europe and fewer shows in the UK. But I think now we're doing 11, 12 shows in January, UK shows, between the, I think, 14th and 23rd or something like that, starting in Cardiff, ending in Manchester, I think.
Right.
But yeah, I think we're going to do one. I've not been to Newcastle for a while, and Ceiling Demons are going to play the Newcastle show at Little Buildings, is it? So yeah, they're going to play that show. So it'd be great to see them because I love what they do. I you know, from their first videos to seeing them develop, and what I really like about those guys is like every show they do is different, and they take things in a different direction, and they always, you know, and it might be just the two of them with an acoustic guitar, and then it might be the full band, and they always put a different spin on it. So I really looking forward to having them play again.
Yeah, I can completely concur with you. I mean, that's one of the things that when I originally got into Seeing Demons was I was just like, wow, that's you're doing something which is quite rare these days, being different but not trying to be prerogative, you know, trying to provoke people or just be like shock value. They're actually just, it comes from their soul and their heart, and you know, and it's again, it's one of the reasons. On your sort of UK tour, you got anywhere near Scotland? I mean, I speak for someone who lives in Scotland.
Yeah, we do 13th note in Glasgow. So
oh, beautiful, great venue.
Yeah, it's 13th. So that should be cool. It's just the big issue for me now at the moment is just like I don't expect to make any money out of these shows. Like all the money, if we do make any money, it always goes back to the artists. It's more like damage limitation. How much can you not lose? And that's getting harder and harder because understandably the venues are going to put up their prices, right? Because it's really hard for the venues to survive. But whereas like venues that I used to use, they would charge me like 70, 80 pounds to put on a night. They're looking at charging me 150 pounds now for lots of venues like that, and which, you know, I understand that, you know, they've got a lot of overheads now. Things are getting harder and harder, but it makes it really hard for me to put on an event like that because I try and cover at least give each of the artists money for, regardless of how many people turn up. What I always say to the artists is that I don't care if anyone turns up, I'm still going to give you some money towards travel and travel expenses. So like it's not a lot of money, but I might say give 30, 40 pounds to a band, right? And it's not a lot, but I'll guarantee that. I say, Luke, I'll give you that. So that would make putting on a show would cost me like 300 quid, right? If I go to pay 150 for the venue, and then so it makes it almost impossible. So yeah, I have to try and find venues that will let me put on a show for like 50 to 100 pounds max. Otherwise I can't afford to do it.
It's a great venue you picked in Glasgow. I don't know, maybe we sort of talk about this off air on another point, but I would love to sort of, it's not that far for me to get down to. I'll go and come and paint with you. I'll come and paint live on stage with you because I love painting.
Yeah, oh, that'd be amazing. I'd love that. That'd be fantastic. That'd be brilliant. Yeah, that'd be super cool. That'd be amazing.
Well, perfect, man. Well, I've just seen the clock and we've got the clock ticking down. So before I do sort of wrap this up, I'm going to leave you with a final word. And thank you for giving me your time tonight. And I know it's hard to pull yourself away from the warm evenings in Rio to come and sit and talk to someone in Scotland. But
no, it's been really good. I've had like a weird day today. Just, you know, it's one of those sort of hungover days where you don't really do much. I think it's been good to get out of myself and do this actually, and yeah, I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the opportunity. So thank you.
No, like I said, I want to leave you with a final word, but just as a quick aside, I once knew a guy in Argentina, and it's sort of like the two things to connect you. And he was obviously he had family from Brazil, so one side of his life was Botafogo, and ironically the other side of his life for some strange reason was Stoke City, and it's just really weird combination of the two. So it was like, yeah, because exactly, you don't meet many Stoke City fans when you're part of the world. So it was when you said that, I was like, wow, that's a really mad coincidence.
Because Botafogo is my team that I support here, so I support Stoke City and Botafogo.
Perfect, man. So you
that's
somewhere else in the world there is someone close to you, not that far away, who's in the same.
Yeah.
So anyway, like I say, man, I want to leave you with the final word. Thank you for giving me your time, and I'll give the final word to you, my friend.
Yeah, no, it's really cool to do this, and yeah, I you know, it's kind of meeting people like the Ceiling Demons, meeting people like yourself, it's kind of changed my life. My life now is 180 degrees different to what it was 10 years ago. I didn't know any musicians 10 years ago. I didn't know any artists 10 years ago. And I started putting on these shows and I got the confidence to perform. And for me, being around people who are also into what, like the same sort of thing, it's just, you know, it's completely, changed my life. And yeah, I'm a million times like happier now to, you know, performing these shows and meeting people like yourself and that than I was a while back, I think.
Beautiful, the very essence of life is people. Life is people.
Well, they say that life is people and that people are angels and that angels are devils and the devils are me and you.